Well, welcome. I'm Jason White of the Coalition of Active Citizens and your host for today's show. This is our second video of our American Ethics Studies. Today we're interviewing an author, Neil Momin, and discussing his groundbreaking book, Jesus is Involved in Politics, Why Aren't You and Why Isn't Your Church? So welcome, Neil. Thanks for coming. So Neil, you were born in Ghana, right? And you lived in Ethiopia and Eritrea and Yemen, but spent most of your childhood in Sudan.
That's correct.
Okay, so your parents were also from East India.
I'm from East Indian origin, yeah.
East Indian origin.
I was a professor in physics in all those countries. So.
Okay, so you've traveled quite a bit.
A fair amount, yeah.
Fair amount. Mostly in your childhood.
Well, even after I came to the States as a teenager, I traveled after that too, just in my work. So.
Okay, well good. So you are currently an engineer here in the Silicon Valley, designing and building microprocessors, is that right?
Microprocessors, network processors, FPGAs, building boards, designing boards, things like that.
Okay, well it's a pleasure to have you. You're a brilliant man. We're going to have a good time today. And there's also, you are the president or founder of an organization, I believe, called No Blind Faith. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, No Blind Faith basically is an organization that teaches apologetics. Now, apologetics comes from the Greek word apologia, from 1 Peter 3:15, which means to defend or to provide evidence. And so the verse is, always be prepared to provide a defense of the faith that is within you. So it's basically, so No Blind Faith basically teaches people that blind faith is actually evil, condemned in the Bible, and condemned by not only God and punished by God, but also condemned by Jesus.
Well, those are strong statements.
Very strong.
Very strong, with a lot of conviction there. But I surely would like to delve into this matter a little bit more about apologetics. So, why did you write Jesus is in Politics, Why Aren't You, and Why Isn't Your Church?
Well, I think the name tells you right there the frustration that I ran into. I was having lived in all these different countries, and countries with dictatorships, socialism, communism, and you finally come to the States, which is supposed to be the land of the free, and I noticed that a lot of Americans were taking for granted their opportunities in this country, and I see a slide in America into the countries that I used to live in. And so my question was, well, why aren't they involved in politics? I mean, aren't Christians supposed to stem the tide and hold strong? And I found to my amazement that many Christians thought that they shouldn't be involved in politics, which was just baffling to me. Because I've seen what happens when Christians are not involved in politics, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure.
Yes, so you've seen the consequence of Christians not standing up for their faith, not being able to reason their way through a decent conversation about their faith. And you've seen the ramifications of that in different
The effects of
political structures.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Well, so let me ask you this then: could you give a few examples of why you say Jesus was or is in politics?
Well, the first objection that I ran into here in the States was that, well, Jesus wasn't involved in politics because he said, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar, and render unto God what is God."
I've heard that one.
The theory there being that if Jesus wanted you to be involved in politics, he would have said that we should be right then. And the argument is that Jesus did not get involved in Roman politics, so therefore we shouldn't be involved in any politics. The problem comes when you realize that most people have a very poor understanding of Jewish politics. See, in the Jewish system, they had a political organization. But in the Roman system, they also had a political organization, and the biggest complaint is, well, Jesus wasn't involved in the Roman system. Well, the problem is Jesus wasn't a Roman citizen. He was a Jewish citizen. So he would never have gotten involved in Caesar's politics. He would have gotten involved in Herod's politics, if you will, or in the Jewish politics. Well, who were the leaders in Jewish politics? Well, they were the people who made the laws.
No, I know this one.
Okay, who
I know this one.
were the politicians?
I know this one. I believe they were called the Pharisees and the Sadducees.
Yes, in fact, not only were they called the Pharisees, but they were organized in a body called the Sanhedrin.
Ah, yes.
And the Sanhedrin made the laws. Now, some people say, no, the Jews got their laws from God, and so the Sanhedrin had no work to do. This is another misunderstanding. This is the confusion about the difference between a republic and a democracy, and a theocracy, if you will. In a theocracy, all the laws may come from God, and He just schedules them. But the Jews were actually based more like a republic, in that they were based on a supreme moral code. But that only told you what the major primary laws were. It didn't tell you any of the lower laws. So just like our Constitution, we have the supreme law, and then all the senators get together to make all the lower, lesser laws. And in the same way, the Sanhedrin were always dealing with the lesser laws. And the interpretation of the primary law, which was God's law.
So Jesus was surrounded by a body politic that was Jewish in nature.
Jewish in nature.
He was under that rule.
He was under their law, yes.
Their law. And they had, he was subjected to any consequences that would come out of that law, as well as all of his neighbors, his family. That was his culture.
Everything. They would decide, all the different, they would interpret the supreme law. Right. And in fact, his biggest complaint, I mean, when you say Jesus wasn't involved in politics, well, who else was he talking to except his politicians, right? On a daily basis. In fact,
the lawmakers.
The lawmakers, on a daily basis. And he was saying, look, you're interpreting the law wrong. The law of the Sabbath.
Okay.
He's accusing them of A, interpreting the law, B, executing it incorrectly, being corrupt, taking bribes, and he was getting in their faces about the very things that we need to get in the faces of our politicians about.
That is amazing.
You see the parallels right there, right? And here's another thing. Jesus called his politicians names. He called them snakes, vipers, putrid, rotten, open, stinking graves. And here's the cliche.
The putrid part, I don't remember that one, but the graves I do.
Yeah, rotting graves, right?
Rotting graves, right? It's true.
Right?
Yes.
And here's the clincher. He called his supreme politician, Herod, a fox. Now, we think that means he's sly as a fox, but you see, in the Middle East, if you've grown up in the Middle East, you'll realize a fox in the Middle East is not a fox here. A fox in the Middle East is with this mangy, slinky, cowardly, thieving thing that went around and killed your chickens.
More like a pest.
It was a rat.
Or a rat.
Jesus was calling his chief politician a rat.
Rat.
He called him a dirty, stinking rat.
So Jesus Christ, the Son of God,
had very strong words.
Very strong words, even reverted to name-calling.
Well, very appropriate name-calling.
Appropriate name-calling for the politicians and the lawmakers of his day.
Exactly.
Wow, that's not something you're hearing in the churches today.
No, because the churches say, we should never criticize the leader. We should never criticize the politician. Well, you know what? That was all Jesus was doing. And not only was he criticizing them, he was saying, you're wrong here, you're wrong here, you're wrong here. He was just telling them on a regular basis how they were wrong. And how many pastors do we see saying that to politicians? To their face. Not on a pulpit only, but to their face.
At least, I'm only familiar with the American church, and I've never seen that.